My name's Fred Burak, Director of Assessment, and this is Dorothy Thompson, Assistant Director of Assessment. What we want to show you today are the capabilities of Canvas on the instructional level. And we will tie that to the program level, but that's a whole nother session. But we'll understand what is possible within Canvas. And as we're going through, if you have questions, I definitely encourage you to ask them at what particular time. I'm first going to go over an overview through a PowerPoint of this is what Canvas can do. Then I want to spend most of the time inside of Canvas in the things that you are using so you know how to manipulate them. Everything's going to be recorded. So if you see something here, you go, oh yeah, I got to remember that. You can go ahead and write it down, but you also will be able to get it to this. And we also have these instructions on our website right now already. So there's multiple places you can get the information about this. So in general, let's talk about how courses work and the type of assessments we have. If you look at each of those circles in there, imagine each one is a course. And in each course, you have a whole bunch of assignments. And each course has their particular learning outcome that you're going to teach within a course. So this is what, in the course level of Canvas, each one uses Canvas to identify those particular elements. The other thing we want to think about, though, every program on campus has program-based outcomes. In other words, all the courses that are in a program all fit together in a sequence to eventually end up with a knowledgeable student who has the knowledge, skills, and dispositions of a graduating person in that discipline. So each program has student learning outcomes that all of these courses fit into. What we use Canvas for, and it becomes most powerful in this manner, is that we can pull student achievement from specific assessments that align with the program-based outcomes, so that a program can identify how well our students are doing initially upon graduation at the end of the program. But there is the possibility to be able to use Canvas to pull student achievement according to those student learning expectations at multiple benchmark places, at multiple places where you know you want to see, are the students at this level so far to make sure that they can move forward. The way we address this in our assessment process is for the program to identify what are the categories of learning or achievement which are appropriate for your particular learning outcomes. This is redundant for most people, but it's an important concept to understand how we're going to use Canvas, is to identify the categories of achievement. Here's possibilities, a level that's excelling beyond program expectations, which is what a lot of students never get to, and they don't have to get to. What you really want them to get to is they're going to fully meet your program expectations. If you want to think just in your course, you want them to meet your course expectations. Of course, there is a level below that, okay, they're pretty good, they're acceptable, they're not quite meeting every expectation of this outcome, but they're better than impossible. And then there's a level at the bottom that says, we don't want any students to achieve lower than this. This is our lowest acceptable level. In general, this is the structure that we have been using within Canvas and we're using across programs. And this can also, well, we've been doing it all the time in our courses. We call it grading, A, B, C, and D, and F. So it's not a new concept. This is what we do. We categorize multiple achievements into categories and call them something. So thinking about Canvas now, how does this fit in? Most people use Canvas on this bottom layer, the course level. That's the place where you put assignments, you communicate with students, you can put grades in there. There's lots of things you do on that course level. But Canvas has so much more capabilities beyond that course level. Above that course level is the program level. In other words, your program includes a whole bunch of courses. So on that program level, that has a connection between all of the courses in a program. There's a level above that, which is the college level. The college level has access to all of the programs, which has access to all of the courses. Then, of course, there's the institutional level, which across the institution, it all feeds down. What we're going to be talking about is both the course level and that program level, and how can you use that to your benefit. This is the way we have been currently using Canvas, first of all, on the program level. Your program has a student learning outcomes, as we just talked about before. If the assessment measures, what I'm talking about, these categories of achievement, this is our expectation. This is the expectation that's better than what we're expecting. This outstanding every once in a while students get, here's this level that, okay, it's acceptable, but it's just not quite there yet. Here's this level of, we don't want to accept that, but of course it happens in the specific outcomes. Or whatever the program chooses. If we have those outcomes on that level and bring them down into our courses, then we can use those outcomes and categories for scoring students. And then if you use it in your course level, it can go to our gradings and go to anything you normally do. But those scores can go back to the program to identify how students are doing across your program, how students are preparing at the end of your course to make sure they're ready for the next level, and whatever curricular constructs that you want to find information about. Think about that as we're talking about how Canvas works, because this is the power that Canvas has that gives you information that you did not have before Canvas. Because before Canvas is, here's how they did in my assignment, and we put that together, and here's my course grade, and I'm done with them. They're going to move to the next thing. But there's a lot. The faculty are too valuable to end there. Their learning is a component of a larger sequence. So there's a difference. Also in Canvas, we have to understand what is grading and what is outcomes assessment. In grading, this is what we normally do. We have an assignment, and that assignment includes multiple things that we're teaching in the course. We almost never test on only one thing. We test on the things we taught for the first couple of weeks, multiple things. And then each assignment includes multiple aspects. But what we do in grading, and this is what we have to do to know how students are doing in a grade, we average all those together and get a course grade. The problem with that course grade is inside the assignment, you're actually assessing multiple things. And when you end up with the course grade at the end, it's difficult in that course grade to know which part are they doing well and which part are they not doing quite so well. And especially across multiple courses and across time, it doesn't tell us enough information. Here's the concept I want you to think about. What if, and this what if is actual, is true. We can do this through Canvas. We have those assignments that assess multiple component aspects. But what if we can take those aspects and find the scores of what they're doing in each of the component parts? And what if even more detailed, each component part that you're assessing in an assignment can be identified achievement in the multiple criteria that fit into those particular outcomes? This is what Canvas can do automatically if we get it set up right and if we're using it correctly. So in other words, instead of we know the average of how our students are doing in an assignment or in a course across our program, we know specifically how well they're doing in each criterion that fits into the outcomes that align with the program outcomes, etc. That's the construct I want you to have as we're talking about what Canvas is going to do. Now let's talk about Canvas itself. And again, excuse me if I'm just telling you something you already know, but it's important that we confirm that what you know about Canvas is how it actually works. Canvas, in their assignments, has, in essence, two categories of assessing students. One category, in Canvas, they're called question banks. You maybe have never seen that term, but I'm going to show you how that term comes up. Question banks are those individual questions with the right and the wrong answer. This is multiple choice, true and false, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these can be used in little tiny quizzes They call them, by the way, this is important to know, they call them quizzes. Even if it's an end of the semester comprehensive exam, they call it quizzes. That's their term. And that takes all of those type of assessments that you can put in there and keep track of students' achievement. The other side of assessment is what they call rubrics assessments. Rubrics we call as a terminology of a thing, a measure that we use. But think of rubrics as your scholarship, your knowledge to make decisions on how well students are doing in specific criteria. It's very much the same as question banks, but it gives you the option to make the decision. It very well might be someone gets the right answer, but they don't fully understand it as well. It gives you to be able to get more depth at what the students are learning. Let's move ahead and look at each of these components. Come on. Undo that. I'm stuck. There we go. If you haven't used this quiz function, these are all the different type of questions that you can build in Canvas, or that you can upload from your question banks you're getting from your textbook and put into Canvas. A lot of people haven't used that function, so they keep sticking with what the areas, components they have. But if you can use Canvas to be able to collect that information, you have the possibility to be able to use that information to gain more knowledge about students. Now let's imagine that, there we are. There we go. In a multiple choice thing, just imagine whatever multiple choice type of question you have. It comes up, you have a whole list of questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. That in grading, this is what we do. We take all of the scores, right and wrong, and we average them into a single score for the assignment grade, which is good. We need to do that. But what it does not tell you is of which categories students are doing better, which categories are doing worse. So for you as a faculty member, to be able to take all of those questions and sort out the rights and wrongs by each different type of category, that's a lot of work, nearly impossible. No one's going to do it. In Canvas, if we then can assign which questions belong to which outcome, it can automatically sort the scores by that particular outcome or that particular criteria that you were assessing, or another set of questions address a different outcome, or another set address different outcomes. So we can find students' achievement, not only how well did they do on your exam, but how well are they learning the component parts of your exam. And this becomes an automatic process that'll tell you that, and tell the students as well. So I want to go to Canvas and show you how this works. In Canvas, and I'm in a course, the course level, the place you would be in, if you go to what's called quizzes, and I think you probably know this, when you go into quizzes and there's all your tests that they have, that you have. And that makes sense. Now, one thing most people haven't gone to is this little button over here with 3 little dots. When you click on that, you go to what's called the question banks. Remember earlier when we said we have question banks and we have rubrics? Here's the question banks that most people don't know about. You go to question banks, and down within the question banks are all of the questions that you have. Let me make a quick change in here. When you make a test, unfiled questions. I'm going to change the title. When you make a test, every time you make a test, it's going to have a question bank called unfiled questions. So if you have 5 tests, you're going to have 5 unfiled questions. I've already changed these in this course that I have, but it'll just say unfiled questions, and they're organized. No. Yeah, each test you have will have a different organization of those questions.
If I may, every time you group a set of questions together under a quiz that you've made, Canvas makes a question, an untitled
Yeah.
folder to collect those as well for you.
Yeah, it's unfiled questions. Now, they're still in the organization of your tests, so it still gives you all of them averaged together. But what you want to do, if you want to do this, to identify, now some of those questions address this learning construct, and some address this learning construct, etc. This is how you would do it. You would want to go in there and add a question bank. And let's imagine the questions I want to get to are critical thinking. I'm going to create a folder called critical thinking. I'm going to put a G on it. And I'm going to to be able to make it save, you push Shift, and there's my folder, critical thinking. There's nothing in it. And we don't want to make new questions and putting in it. We want to find the questions that are already in your tests and align with that. This is how you would go about doing that. I'm going to go into unfiled questions. So there's questions, and it says, here's the thing that I don't like about Canvas, but this is the way it is. If you know what the meaning is, it's okay. It says move multiple questions. When you move questions, it doesn't take them out of your test. What it's actually doing is aligning them, saying this question belongs to critical thinking, and this question belongs to quantitative reasoning, etc. So I am going to go to move, and here's all the questions that are in there. And I know that it's going to be question 11 and question 13 and question 15 that deal with critical thinking. And I want to, okay, it says move. Remember, I'm not moving them. I'm aligned. They're still in your test. But I am saying that these are all critical thinking questions. And I'll push move questions. And if we go, if I go back to the question bank now, it says in critical thinking, there are 3 questions that are aligned to there. You don't have to worry, they're still in your test. But now they're in a folder called critical thinking. The one thing we want to do is be able to pull information, have those aligned with an outcome called critical thinking. So what we need to do is make sure we have an outcome in your folder, in your program. Now, here's the other aspect I want you to think about. If you are going to create outcomes for your course, and that's the only place you want to know those outcomes is within your course, you can create them yourself. Most of the time, the outcomes that you want to collect, actually you want to collect for the program as well as your course. So what you would do is, I'm going to go to outcomes. This outcome button's there, but most people don't go there. When you go there, I want to go find an outcome. I'm going to go find it in your program. All your program outcomes are already there. And what you're going to connect to is whatever if you're connected in your program, let's say you're in K-State First, and K-State First is your program. What will show there is whatever your program is. I'm going to go into there, and here's all the outcomes that are in that group, your program. I want this one, and I'm going to pull it into your course, and I might say, I want another one too. I want that one. I'm going to assess that somewhere in my course. And I'm going to, okay, I'm just bringing these outcomes in. Notice they're already created. I'm going to talk about how to create outcomes in a little bit, but this is first how to put them in there. And let's look one more time. And I'm going to look here for critical thinking. I want critical thinking in particular. I know that's the one I just created, so I'm going to bring that in. In my course, I have 3 outcomes. They're not connected to anything, but they're in my course. I'm going to go back to my quiz now, and there's this folder that, see, these are all the tests. They're still all 25 questions per test, but I'm going to go back to the managed question banks, and I want all of the questions that are ever answered that are aligned with critical thinking to be, I'm going to pull those scores. Whenever they're scored, I want to know all the critical thinking. I'm going to align this with critical thinking. And I push import, that connects it. And now anytime these questions from this test, those 3 questions, it'll collect those scores. Now let's imagine you have critical thinking questions on test 1, 3, and 5, and 7. You can align the questions from all of those into this folder, and then anytime they answer the question that's critical thinking from test 1, it's collected here in critical thinking. From test 3, it's collected here as well. It's still collected for your grade book. And it's still, you use them in your course any way you want to, but now you are able to pull student achievement by specific questions, specific criteria, based upon however you organize that system. And yeah, please.
Will it just align the questions that are currently in that bank, like a year later, if you add a couple more questions, will they automatically be aligned because you put them in the bank, or do you have to do that?
The questions that you have already aligned are already there. Now, if you make a new test, in that new test would be called unfiled questions. You haven't aligned anything in those yet. So you would want to go into that test and say, oh, I want these 2 questions, and put them into that folder. The alignment, if they're in the folder, anything that's in the folder always goes to critical thinking. That was probably your question, but I wanted to address both. Yeah.
And modify an existing quiz and add more, you have to upload.
Okay, the question was, if you modify the existing information, say the existing question in your test, okay, anytime you add a question to your test, it's in your test, but it's not connected to a folder. So then if it's supposed to also collect that information for critical thinking, then you just go and put it in the critical thinking folder, and then the score will go. Yeah, so you have total control over it. The nice thing about that, let's imagine you have a whole bunch of and eventually you build critical thinking and written communication, whatever outcomes you have. Let's say you ever wanted to say, I want to do a critical thinking test in my discipline. You've got all your questions there, and you can have it randomly choose out of this folder and have it create its own test. That's all. There's so many possibilities that go with that. But that's how you as a course could collect information, or as a program could collect information from these multiple choice type examples.
So kind of to follow up on
Yeah.
that, what if you do change the question quiz? Will it update it in this folder?
Yes. Yeah, because it's the original question. And what I mentioned when it said move, it's not duplicating, but it's aligning. I wish they would have used the word align, because that makes sense to me. But if I explain it to you, then, you know, we're all smart enough, we can figure that out. Yeah, but that's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, this may or may not help you, maybe you don't want to simple, but they try to abstract the instructors from the other having to think of where it's located. They want you to think about, you just use it. And if you use it in more than one exam, that's okay. We're always going to sort of do 3 things for you. Keep it in the exam that you said it was supposed to be a part of. Always organize them into an unfiled folder to start with, if you group or add to that group. So you know that grouping matches this thing at the moment. And then as present day, as you reorganize it or add things to it, they tend to be non-destructive in anything you do. So if you move something in their language, they tend to not actually break anywhere else.
Yeah. It's all connected then. Let's talk a little bit about these rubrics. And this is, of course, rubrics you know are equally as objective. People think of rubrics as, oh, they're so subjective. No, they're not subjective at all. If you know what you're looking for, they're extremely objective. This is the type of things you've seen. These type of rubrics can be as simple or as complex as you might want to. In Canvas, it makes it so easy to score things that you have to make decisions on just by clicking the button and submit it. It saves so much time, but exactly how that's worked is a whole other presentation. But the way this works is in every rubric, you identify the criteria that you want to assess and the levels in which you're going to define student achievement. Within this, you can take any particular line that's on a rubric and say, I want the score from this line to go to this outcome, and the score from this line to go there. So in other words, when you score your assignment, you're doing what you normally do. You'll score the whole assignment. The computer, Canvas, is going to pull the scores from whatever you have aligned and be able to collect the achievement according to the achievement category. So I'm going to go to Canvas again and show you very quickly how that is done. In Canvas, you would go into assignments. And this is where I'm not going to talk about how to create an assignment. Let's imagine one of your assignments is a paper, but it very well might be an observation that your students are in a lab and you're walking around and you want to score them on the things that you're observing. We have people doing that. It works great for presentations, or they go out in the field and they're testing the grass and the ground, and you want to check their observation skills. You can score them in many different ways, more than just on the paper. But here we get the paper, and it's going to come up your assignment. I'm not going to talk about how to create assignments. And if you want some instruction on that, feel free to ask us. But when you create an assignment, there is at the bottom, this is what you see, rubric. Now, this is your scoring device, and when you click on rubric, it's going to come up with a generic place where you can build a rubric. You can just build a rubric inside of your course, put the title on it, and here's this particular criteria, and we're going to call that criteria number 1. And oh, all right, there we go. Okay. I'll just make that, it looks sort of funny. And we're going to update that. There we go. All right, and then you can add whatever rubric levels that you want, and it's going to ask me to title it 3. You'll put whatever title and description you want in it. Of course, you would be more descriptive than numbers, but you'll create that rubric. But let's imagine right now, anything you create here on your own, that only goes to your grade. It's going to be averaged together. If you want it to be able to collect information from a specific criteria and put that in there, you should not create it in this area. You should create it by outcome. You will create the outcome and pull the outcome in. So let's imagine now that there's a criteria that just goes toward the grade. But I also want to assess their critical thinking, and it'll be whatever you say it's going to be. When you go find it, remember we had brought outcomes into your course? So you can go get that outcome, and when you find it, you're going to have a check. You've got to look here and say, do I want to use that as part of my overall grade? And if you do, you leave it checked. If you want to score it, but you don't want it to affect the grade, you just want to keep your assessment of that thing, you can uncheck it. And you will still score it, but it won't impact their grade. I'm going to leave it scored, though, just because I want to. Here's the input. Now, there's the outcome that we pulled in, and you know the score is going to go somewhere, wherever that was created, because it has the target. If you ever have a rubric that doesn't have targets, that score will only stay in your course for that assignment, and that score won't go anywhere else. The only way it goes somewhere is if you pull it from somewhere and you create that outcome. I'm going to show you a little bit of how to create the outcome in just a bit. But let's imagine also that you are in a program that is going to have 3 or 4 courses, and professors are going to teach the same thing and assess the same thing, and you want them to use the same rubric. You, as a program, can create the rubric. Remember the program level, the course level, program level. You can create the rubric on the program level, and you can tell your faculty, say, guess what? I'm going to save you time. You don't have to create your rubric at all. Just go find it. It's already created for you, made of outcomes. And you want to go find a rubric, and it's going to go into the rubrics, and you will go find a particular rubric. And I'm going to take this one. It just happens to be from the CAT community, but I want to use that one. And I'll go to the bottom. We chose that and use that rubric. Now that rubric comes down here, and there's made of outcomes, so all the outcomes are there already. And all then they do is they can go into SpeedGrader, and within SpeedGrader, you can go to each of the students. If they submitted a paper, the paper would be there. They can put their feedback right on the paper, whatever you would want to do to give feedback. we want to see the rubric. There's that rubric we brought up. And I want to score this person. See, all the students are here. So you just go to the student you want to score. Look, you're going to give that. No, he's really bad at that. And is good there. And then you push click, you push save. The score goes to your grade book automatically. But the score also for each one of those categories, each line is pulled out and put into that folder from this assignment at the very same time. And that saves a ton of time. You know how we hate for our department heads or whatever to come back and say, can you give us the scores for this for our assessment projects or collecting from multiple assignments? If we set it up right, the faculty, all they have to do is that they normally do. They score their stuff in their classes. And if it's aligned within Canvas, those scores automatically are collected in any way that we might possibly need. And that's about all there's to the rubric aspect. And there's so many different ways you can create rubrics, but this is a very easy way to make this happen. Any questions on that component?
You can't edit that anyway, you know, tailor the description a little bit in a particular assignment.
When we brought it in, if I'm going to go back.
Right. I mean, even if you want the same headings and same points, you know, if I want to specify a little bit more in the description for that.
Okay. There's multiple ways you can do that. Well, let's say, first of all, this is not what you asked, but I will explain this. If you brought a whole rubric in and you want to use 3 of the 5, you can get rid of 2 of them. And you can add others underneath that if you want to keep track of these 3 things, but you want to have 4 things that you're doing just for your assignment, you can add that. Now let's imagine, this is where you can become creative and it all works. Let's imagine for your class, Thinking Critically CAT. And this course that's created has these words, but your assignment, you'd like a little different words. On that program level, we're gonna have Think Critically CAT General. You'll have Think Critically CAT whatever your course number is. We can create each of those on the course level, so you can have, every faculty can have their type of wording that works best for their assessment, but they're all in the same folder. So when you use this one, and someone else uses this one, and someone else uses this one, all the scores are still in there. And so yes, you can. And we can help you with any type of manipulation you need. One is to make sure the faculty have autonomy to do the things that are best for their course, and yet still be able to pull the information common that you would need to be able to identify student achievement across your program. And we can, and I can't tell you all the options in any presentation because there are so many. But that's what we're there to do, is help you to use this as effectively as possible. That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. And if there are more questions, please feel free to ask. Now, many places are using these rubrics. They use them in labs. They use them in teacher education. They watch people teach, and they give scores with that. They can do it out in the fields. They use it. This is used a lot for oral communication when you don't necessarily want, you know, you're watching them and you're making decisions. Now, I want to show you how this works in Canvas. I said I would tell you a little bit about how to create outcomes. You create outcomes the same way in the program level as you do in the course level. So whatever I'm telling you here is what you would do if you were on the program level and making outcomes that people are going to use. If you're making outcomes inside of your course, just for your course and not for your program, you do it the same way. You go to the outcomes button, and you would, if you want to have a group, say you have an outcome that has multiple criteria in, you would click on group and create a folder, because you know you're going to put different criteria that you want to assess inside of that folder, which is the example right here. There's a folder there, and you did that by clicking group and typing the name of it in. Inside of that group, you can create individual criteria that you want to assess. Now, let's imagine you have a rubric and you have written communication is what you want to keep track of. But you want to keep track of their accuracy of spelling. You want to keep track of their use of citations. You want to keep track of sentence structure, and they're all different, but they're all written communication. You would create a folder for written communication, and you would then put, they're called outcomes. Each of these are the outcomes, but I like the word criteria better, but they call them outcomes. You click on outcome, and you'd create the rubric line or the scoring line, and for citations and for sentence structure and for whatever. And then they're there for you to use. And those criteria that the accessible components are called the outcomes. So each of these, there can be multiple criteria inside of an outcome folder, and that structure is what helps us we can pull all the information from outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're all connected inside this folder. So we can see how students are doing in written communication as a whole, and we also can separate those out to see how they're doing in each criteria. We can help you design this type of process within your course, or even better, within your program.
Is that just part of the regular home menu landing page?
Uh-huh. Yes, I just copied that out of everyone has it.
Yeah, you were showing the admin interface that most of these books will have.
But if you go into your course thing, those buttons are still there. The outcome.
The ones that were on the left side navigation.
But in the course, they do have an outcome button. They can create their outcomes in their course.
They stay on your course.
They stay on your course. What is there? Let's go back.
That image was confusing because he said you just click on outcomes here, but they don't have a button like that.
Oh, well, no, they don't have, okay, they don't have this one, but they have outcomes and rubrics. They have that button there. And that's your, oh, okay, oh, that's right. They have, you can get to outcomes.
Yeah, you have to go through, like you showed earlier, you have to go through the quizzing and the question bank.
Yeah,
clicking.
That makes sense, because the rubrics you're going to create in the course are on an assignment. Yeah, but you can create outcomes in your course. That's the one that is there.
Navigation is in your course.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I was only paying attention to the outcomes aspect. And the outcomes is there. You can do that in a course, and you can do that in a program. Remembering, though, if you create an outcome in your course, it won't go anywhere. It'll stay in your course. But there is a reason to maybe collect outcomes in your course alone. And I'm going to show you that just very briefly, too, in the next 10 minutes. When you're creating this scoring level, it's going to ask you to decide what is the level of your expectation. The word they use is mastery. Now, that does not mean the students have mastered that outcome. It means they have reached the expectations of rigor that you're defining. So when you say mastery, this meets our expectation. So meets might be a number 3, or meets might be a number 4, or meets might be a number 2. You will define out of these levels, what is the level you really want people to be? That's all that means. Now, I was mentioning before, there is an advantage to keeping track of outcomes inside of your course, and this is what I want to share with you. If you had, this is within a course base, this isn't on the institutional level, within your course, there are 2 different types of grade books. One of them is your grade book that you have, and I've mentioned before, the assignments take all the different things and they average them to a grade, and you put all those grades in your grade book that averages them into a course grade. But if you want to know how well they're doing in each component that you have defined as an outcome, whether the outcome comes from the program or is something you built inside of your own course, it will keep track of whatever you have defined are the outcomes you want to keep track of. So if you go, and I'll show you how to turn this on in just a bit. If you went to the Learning Outcomes gradebook, this is what you'd see. Here's all your students. Here's the outcome number 1 for fluency. Here's the outcomes for phonics, the outcomes for craft, whatever you have defined as each of the outcome criteria that you are assessing. You have defined in your outcome what meets your mastery level, which remember we said was mastery, you set mastery at say 3 out of 4. It'll show you out of all the assessments that they've done across your course, which students have hit mastery and how often have they hit it. If they have not met it, this is say if mastery is 3, if they've hit 2s and they haven't got more 2s than 3s, they will have a yellow. If they're hit at the lowest level, that's going to show red, saying here's the ones to pay attention to. Or if there's a level above that, say a number 4, there will be a darker green saying these are the ones who are doing even better. They're at the highest level. You set those levels, however, is going to be useful to you. But now you could, in essence, I'm not in there, so this isn't interactive, but if I clicked on the red, it would take everything out. Now I can see all the students which are having trouble, and those are the ones I need to talk to about this one area, because that's where they're having most trouble. And you can use that in your course if you have it set up to identify, here's where students are having more challenge with. And this is where it could be useful within a course using Learning Mastery. If you want to go to that extent, just set that up. But if you have lots of things to keep track of, say if you have multiple choice questions that deal with circulatory system and veins and arteries and heart, and you identify which questions fit which each criteria, you can, out of all the assessments, you can look to see, oh, it's the heart questions that they're having the most trouble with, which is nearly impossible to find out if they've taken 3 or 4 tests with 100 questions a test. So this is the possibility you could use. And the nice thing about it is you then can also click on any one of these areas and see how your class is doing as a whole. It'll average them together so you can see how they're fitting in the range per outcome or criteria that you're assessing. The student, yes?
You could also form a collaborative community with other instructors in the course and compare and use the data to inform classroom instruction and by comparing the data.
You certainly could. What she said is you could have collaborative with multiple instructors and use the data to identify either across courses to where students' achievements or struggles are and make decisions, instructional decisions to make improvements. And this just gives you the information so much faster and immediately, rather than having to wait for later and have to disaggregate everything, whether we even disaggregate or not. You even have the possibility to be able to dig down into which are the assessments that are holding them back. If it may not be, maybe a single assessment. And the students can get to this too in their Student Learning Mastery Gradebook, where they can go and see how they're not only how they're doing as their overall grade, but how are they doing in each of these components that you've been assessing and collecting grades. And then they can go and find out which assignment that they had the most trouble with. Who knows, wouldn't it be nice if they'd be able to come back and say, I see in my grade book I'm having trouble with this and it's on this assignment. Now, that was 2 assignments ago, but I don't really understand that. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about my marketing course where I did paper exams.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way in Canvas where I could create this exam, align the questions and all that, and print the PDF? Because I graded Scantron.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to do the exam in Canvas and then do the PDF?
Now, there is a way, if you can create the exam in Canvas and then use those questions in your Scantron, then upload the Scantron back into Canvas, then Canvas knows which questions go to which. And also, sometimes in Scantron, you want to have 3 or 4 versions of the same test, and it mixes up the questions. If you tell Canvas, enter these questions, and here's version 1, here's version 2, version 3. When you pull the data back in, it knows where to organize them, and you can get that information.
My point is, I don't want to type the questions twice. I don't want to have to type them in Canvas and then type them in Word and print out that. They're ready to I print quizzes from like 100 questions. I don't want it to be.
There is not a print button like you would expect or something in Canvas that would put out a nicely formatted, not break your questions, for example, across 2 pages. You can print from your browser, and you may struggle generically with that without derailing what they're trying to do. That's literally in the top 3 single most requested features in Canvas from every institution that uses it, and it's in the class of none of us in the world can believe you don't have a stupid print button in your learning management system to get into the program. So it's a very noticed need, and there's no decent way to do it.
But the other options, the workarounds, are to export, and then you'll have all those questions. And what it looks like of the export is, I don't know, I don't do that. I don't do the Scantron. There is the other possibility that all your questions are in a question bank that you got from a company, publishing company, or whatever. If you don't, or if you have it in a certain format, then you import it into Canvas. And so you have it originally. I'm sorry, I can't answer the question, the easy way to do that, but let's figure it out together. And if there's a way that we can make your life easier, because you don't want to type things twice, of course not. But maybe through an export, we might be able to create that with fairly easily. I don't know how it exports. We'd have to try it.
So you just come in and read the question, and then use a Scantron sheet, a bubble sheet.
I type in a word, I print it out, I do a Scantron, I fill out the correct answers. Our IT guy scans them, number 1, here's how many answers, and I have to refer back to my paper.
So the short answer to that is, if you create those questions in Canvas in the Scantron tool instead of starting with Word, then they will all already be in this process, and you can use that to get a paper version.
Well, and that was my question. I created it in Canvas, then can I just print it?
So we had to address that specific intersection. There is a print button in the Scantron tool that we added to Canvas. So if you create the question in Canvas and not start with a Word document, then you can get a Word document in the end through the Scantron tool. We can go offline and I'll help you with that later.
Yeah, I'm glad you have the answer to that. Yeah.
It's awkward. I'm sorry. I wish it was better.
But here's the structure, the overall structure then. If you have those outcomes created somewhere, and either in your course or you bring them down in particular into your course, then you just assess your courses using those. The score comes to you as the faculty, but then the score that is supposed to go to the program automatically moves up to the program level, and then you can use that information and separate it out in all of these different mechanisms that we might have. So it gives you much more understanding of the different types of learning more specifically than you would with a grade point average.
How do you access that data?
Okay.
Can you?
Yes. In Canvas, let's go back. In Canvas, there's 2 different type of things, but if it's comes from the program outcomes, there is someone in your program, and the Office of Assessment can go into the program and into the settings, and we can download all the data that's ever been collected on an outcome. And what we do in the Office of Assessment is just do all that for you. And if you want information across your whole program according to these outcomes, we will create tables and charts. And if you want to dig down further to your specific courses, we can create those as well. We don't expect you to have the capacity, unless you want us to teach you how to transform all this data into charts, into tables, etc. We do that for you any way that you want to. We've done that yet for you, Abby? Yeah, okay, yeah, we have for you. But it's done within the settings, in the settings underneath. Yes. And we will give people the administrative access. Someone in your program, if we've already done it, already has administrative access. But there's multiple ways. Yes, we can get the data. Now, we'll tell you the data that comes from the course level that you can get to doesn't quite look the same way. You can get, if you have outcomes data and you have created outcomes, I can show you how to get the outcomes just from your course. And it comes in an Excel file with all the captions, all the names of the students, all the assignments there, what scores are in there, whatever you've collected. And if you know how to manipulate Excel and use pivot tables and create charts, you can do that yourself within the course. For the program, it can take all the information from all the courses according to the outcomes and be able to sort it in that way. So without being terribly specific, that's the way we would do it. And if you want to know how to do that, we're happy to show you. The very last few things I want to show you before we finish today is that much of this information is available to you. It's so working so slow. Is available to you on our Office of Assessment website. If you go to the Office of Assessment website and you click on a picture like this, underneath it are videos to show you step by step on how to do things in Canvas. Underneath that are, again, step-by-step instructions. How do you create a rubric? How do you import a rubric? How do you align outcomes to a rubric? Each step-by-step, there are some videos, there are pictures. It tells you exactly how to do whatever you want to do. And you are also very welcome to call us, and we want to come and help you with this. To be able to make this work. And whatever crazy ideas you have about how can you get more information from student learning to make it more useful, then that's what we're here for. We will brainstorm some of these questions that you have that we don't quite have the answer for. We will figure out a way to make it happen. And sometimes we can't figure it out, but most of the time we can. So this is the overall structure. This is what's possible in Canvas. Are there any more questions before we end today that you would like the opportunity to ask? One thing I did not show you is what do we do? This is sort of the questions you got into it. Once we get the data, what do we do with it? And that's a whole nother session. We will have sessions on that too. We use Power BI to be able to take the data and put it into tables, put it into charts where you can be able to say, I want to see the achievement in this outcome, say critical thinking, and I want to see achievement across 5 different courses in this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, this criteria. And whatever you have designed in your process, we can sort by, and we will create these links so you can automatically get this data. Very soon, this data is going to be able to come directly out of Canvas, directly into these dashboards, and it's going to be updated on a daily basis. So if you want to design a system that has checkpoints across your curriculum, maybe even checkpoints across your course, to say at this point, I want to see how students are doing in these 5 outcomes. We can create that process for you. If you tried to do that individually, actually in a course, it's fairly easy to do it yourself, unless you have 500 kids in your course, and then you don't, then it's nearly impossible again. But if to have students' achievement at certain places across a curriculum, when they're taking courses here, and all different assignments, it's hard, if not impossible, to know how are they doing in these component parts. And we can help you design that. So that's another topic we'll talk about in the future. Yes, Abby?
What if you have a class that includes students who are not all in your major?
Okay, the question is, what if we have a class that includes students who are not in your major? And when we put the data and put these in the dashboards, we know through the student information system which ones belong to your major and which ones don't. So we create a filter. I say, I want to only see our majors, and then the rest of that data just doesn't show. If
Within your major, can you also do that with options?
yes,
Our major has different options.
yes, and so if you have you want to see how they're doing, who are in the major, but you want to separate those and say, I want to see how are they doing in this outcome for this option as compared to this option. We can automatically separate that too. For you, it just becomes the click of a button and the table changes. You can also do things as far as, I want to see if there's difference between males and females. Or I want to see, is there a difference if they transferred to K-State or started at K-State? Or I want to see if there's a difference between if they're a first-generation student or if they have a family history of coming to, have university training. Or whatever demographic you might have, we can create that sorting mechanism, even to the point that you're doing an advanced course and you can say, I want to see if students take this 300 level course right before my course as compared to those who took that 300 level course earlier in their sophomore year. And is there a difference when they take this course by how well they do in my course? We can do that too. All of these options that, the whole thing is, what questions that would you like answered that you currently can't do because of the way things are done? We can use Canvas to be able to get to that point, but the first step is we have to first collect information in the outcomes, so then later on we can sort it and visualize it in different ways. So yes, absolutely, sorting by whether they're in your discipline or not and which option they're in, that's easy. Yeah, that's very quick. Any other questions? Well, then I hope that you learned at least one new thing today. And feel free at any time to call the Office of Assessment, because we want to help you to create a system of assessment that's useful. Thanks for coming.